welcome to tonight's seminar hosted by Apapa Tri-Valley Chapter. As you might have known already, Apapa is a nonprofit and a nonpartisan organization aimed to empower the Asian and Pacific Islander Americans through education, active participation, and leadership in civic and public affairs. Tonight, we appreciate everybody to take the time to attend this event, and especially considering the extreme heat that we have been experiencing in the past few days. I'm sure the valuable information that Ms. Betty Yee and Mr. Fong share with us today about California's government structure as well as higher education's policy will be well the efforts. There are a few logistics that I'd like to get out of the way before everything gets started. Please take a moment to turn off your cell phone and any other mobile devices that you may have. Also, at the end of this session, there will be a Q&A session. So you are more than welcome to request from our volunteer index cards for you to fill out the questions during the session. And at the end of the seminar, the volunteers will be collecting the questions from you. And although due to time constraint, we may not be able to answer every single one of those questions, we'll try our best to cover all interested topics. Before we get started, Mr. Mayor of San Ramon, Mr. Bill Carson, would like to say a few words. Bill?
I would have sat down on this side if I...
More exercise is good for you.
Yeah, more exercise is good. Thank you. Number one, first I want to apologize in advance. I have another event to be at, but I asked Andy if I could come and greet and welcome you because I was so appreciative that not only did you choose San Ramon for your big gala this last year, but you chose San Ramon for this forum on government and college education. And I'm also really appreciative of Betty, that you would come and fly all the way up here from Los Angeles to be a part of this today. Your leadership is exemplary, and we really appreciate you doing it. So thank you very much. Thank you, Betty. Really brief comments is that San Ramon, and I'm going to talk about San Ramon. I apologize to those from other cities. San Ramon is an amazing place. It's a majority-minority city. It's the only one here in the Tri-Valley. It's an amazing city because of our diversity, and one of the things that we're really striving to do, both with our service clubs, with our educational systems, with our civic organizations, and our government, is to encourage and nurture all aspects of our community to get engaged, to get on city committees, work up and get on commissions, to run for city council, maybe in a while run for mayor, next election. So it's important because a city thrives. A city thrives when the citizens are in love with it. And when citizens are engaged and they love their city, a city does great. And so the mission we have as electeds, the mission we have both at the state level and all the way down, is to get our residents engaged, get them informed, have them understand how the processes work, and allow them to get involved and nurture and support them, because when they do, our cities will thrive and be great places to live. So thank you. Let me say a few brief words. I'm going to head off to this next event. I know they understood that it was important for me to say hello, to say thank you, and to support the Apapa leadership. You guys do great work, so thank you very much. Thanks, Andy.
Over the past years, Apapa has been actively working with other Asian nonprofit organizations trying to promote positive change in the community. And the FCSM, which stands for the Friends of Children with Special Needs, is one of those organizations. In the past year, our volunteers have been actively supported their mission to help children with special needs and their families to find love, support, respect through integrated community support. And today we are honored to have the chairman of this organization, FCSM, to speak a few words to our volunteers. Mr. Albert Wong.
Thank you, Mark. Margaret. I don't think Margaret introduced yourself, did you? Margaret, our famous MC for all the Papa events here, basically. My name is Albert Wong. I am from Friends of Children with Special Needs. I also double as the Bay Area chair for a Papa region. Our big boss in CCE this year, as well from the national Papa chair. Thank you all for coming. Friends of Children with Special Needs is a very unique organization that was started by Chinese American families who help children with special needs to find love, support, hope through community involvement, to be integrated into the community. We're based in Fremont. We're building a new center in San Jose. Someday we'll probably come here, as there's a large number of Asian population here. Over the years, though, we've grown to an organization of about 100 staff members, and we serve over 800 families at this point. And we very much appreciate a Papa group here to help support us by sending youth volunteers to our organization, by training them, and by coming to spending hours with us. Today I want to honor two of them. Is Isabel Young and Cindy Lee here? They coming from the back? Would you come down, please? They've been most outstanding in supporting FCSN by coming to our various events and helping our children. And of course now FCSN is now 19 years old and we have many adults now. The children have grown up. We serve people from the age of 2 to about, I think our oldest is about 64 at this point. So Isabel and Cindy are two exemplary volunteers who came to FCSN through training and led by Papa leadership here in the Tri-Valley area. We're very happy to collaborate with this group. We hope to have more and more volunteers to join us. I think it's a great opportunity for the young people as well to see children with disabilities and work with them and learn how to work with them and understand them better as they grow up. I think it's a good opportunity to learn, and it's also providing a great service for FCSN. So thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Margaret.
And today we're actually very honored that the founder and chairman, I believe, of Papa is over here, Mr. C.C. Ying.
Thank you, Margaret. Actually, you can see I dressed up with my chains in the back and a McDonald's shirt because I was working in the kitchen, helping my daughter open a new store today in Fairfield. Yeah, so I was rushed to here, but I'm very happy to be here actually. Andy, thank you. Your Tri-Valley team is such progressive and wonderful. They take all the young members by city. Your students outside on the street, I was the last one. But I thought today, I understand you don't have a dinner, but after here, work from the McDonald's. Okay, but I'm very happy to see that Tri-Valley is so active, especially wants to talk about the government and higher education. That is one of the most important part, not just for Asian Americans, for all Americans, about citizenships and to help to build a better government, through higher education. So I want to thank you all. But just quickly, that 14 years ago, when I was, 20 years ago actually, I was doing McDonald's, of course, before I was engineer. But then I was curious. I heard a lot of things that what my friends been doing in Silicon Valley. Dr. Fong, Stanley Xiao, Shen Hong, and Oliver Wong, and doing the CBC, and Joe Wong, and Chin Yao doing Kappa in Water Creek, the Chinese American There's so much program in the past 10 years that I really liked them, but I was learning, I was supporting them. So 14 years ago, I think Betty remember that time before Betty went to Sacramento. And it was 2000, year 2000. At the end of 2000, we would have 0 Asians in Sacramento. Out of 125, I think, elected people here. So, following the inspiration and the encouragement, we kind of found those guys that we together organized the Papa's ideas to take what they had started back 30, 40 years ago in the Bay Area, their programs, internship scholarships, and water distributions, and didn't do appointment, but later we did some government appointment. So we can take the learning and their support, continue their work, be a national organization, and doing the grassroots what they did already. So today we have 15 chapters, 11 in California, 4 outside in the East Coast, and about 20,000 members, most of all volunteers. So thank you for being here, and please, if you like more volunteer, your time, energy, and money, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Cici. We have the president of Tri-Valley Chapter, Mr. Andy Lee, to say a few words to our volunteers.
Thank you, Margaret. And before I start, I'd like to ask all of you, please stand up. I'd like to remember the Hayward Police Sergeant, Scott Lunger, who died on duty 8 days ago. And the memorial service was held this morning at Oracle Arena in Oakland. So let us give a few seconds of silence to honor him. Okay, thank you. You can sit down. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming here, spending time with us. And of course, we cannot have a forum without speaker. Today, we are very honored to have the State Controller, Betty Yee, and also the former California State University Board of Trustees, Dr. Ken Fong, to be our speakers today. And thank you both for coming to ceremony to give us a speech. This event, as you see, is co-hosted by APAPA and APAPA Tri-Valley Chapter, ECA, Dublin Chinese Association, UEFA, United Asian Americans for Activism, and UBC, United for a Better Community. And I'd like to thank all of today's volunteers for their hard work to make this event successful. And special thanks to Abby for helping to promote this event. Also for Nancy to organize the volunteers. In the past, we have many volunteers helping us at various events. Among them, some are parents and some are students. Some came as a family. And thank you all very much. And today we honored those two to help the FCSN. Actually, there's a certificate for them. Unfortunately, the baggage from the controller is still at the airport because of some problem with the airline company, so we cannot present to them, but we'll give it to them a little bit later. And last year, we also honored some volunteers for the voter registration, and in the future, we would like to have more opportunity to honor our other outstanding volunteers. Before I finish my speech, I'd like to ask you a question. So, how do you like this place? It is beautiful? Yes. This is provided by Sensa. In the past, Sensa has been a great supporter for Papa Taiwan chapter. They support us with our grand opening gala and our participation to the Art and Music Festival in ceremony. And this time they provide this beautiful auditorium for us. And thank you, Sunset. Also, thank you, the owner, Alex Becker. Actually, the California State Controller Becky prepared a certificate for him. Like I said, the luggage is still at the airport, and also Alex is out of town. And but their senior vice president, Harut, is here, and I know we cannot let him to accept the award, but I'd like to have him to say a few words.
Hi everyone, my name is Harun Hagopian. I'm the General Manager and Senior Vice President here at Bishop Branch. I would like to welcome all of you to the Roundhouse Conference Center. We're very pleased that you're here. We recently just finished completing all of the renovations to the conference facilities, and we have many more renovations still that we're working on, but we're happy to make this space available for you for this wonderful forum. Our owner, Alex Barron Jr., could not be here tonight, but he asked me to express his gratitude and to really commend the Papa for all of their community service and civic engagement and helping to educate the youth. He thinks that it's a fantastic organization and that you're all doing very good work. So I wanted to make sure that I expressed that. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, tonight, we're very honored to have our California Controller, Ms. Betty Yee, to give us an overview of the structure of California's state government, the roles and responsibility of each key position. Now, Ms. Yee is a perfect example of a minority, and in terms of her race as an Asian American, as well as a woman. She has accomplished a lot. She has been a longtime supporter for Papa, and prior to becoming elected as the California Controller, she has served as the Chief Deputy Director of Budget, as well as the Chief Deputy for the Board of Equalization. In addition, she also served as the Vice President for California Women Lead, a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization for women holding or interested in running for political offices. Without further ado, let's welcome Ms. Betty Yee.
Thank you, Margaret, very much. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us in this forum. And I'm just very, very honored to be here. And Harun, thank you for being such a gracious host to Apava and for our forum this evening. I also just want to acknowledge the tremendous efforts of not only the volunteers of Apava, but as we also honored through Dr. Abdul, the volunteers with families of children with special needs. It is a tremendous organization. And I think when we talk about the empowerment of the Asian Pacific Islander community, it's not just about what we do on the public sector side, but certainly with respect to our community at large and how we support one another. And I know growing up as a first-generation American, I really understood the value of community because I had a remarkable experience growing up in San Francisco where my parents had a laundry dry cleaning business in a very, very different kind of community. It wasn't in San Francisco Chinatown. is on the west side of San Francisco among Irish Catholics, Greek Orthodox, Italian Americans, Lebanese, Armenians. It's truly a melting pot. And the reason that I talk about this is because I didn't feel any discrimination as a young child, and only until I was much older did I really have my first experience with being discriminated against. And the reason being is that I grew up around the value of community, and that my parents were fully embraced, not even knowing English all that well, with setting up their business by the neighbors in the community. And it was a time when if anybody was suffering in the community, everyone felt that it was really a sign of what was wrong with the entire community. So I say that because I think as I look at what's developing here in the Tri-Valley, I'm feeling that sense certainly within diversity we see here in the Tri-Valley as well. I really appreciated what Mary Clarkson had to speak about earlier. What I'm going to do tonight is try to talk about the structure of our government and actually focus on the state, but more importantly, I think as residents here in the Tri-Valley, certainly as we look at what's going on across our nation, it's important to know really what our role is as far as being citizens and residents of the state. And I'll also allow room for questions at the end. But the purpose of this is really to further the mission of APAPA, and that is we want to be sure that as Asian Americans that we really have the most robust participation as we can with our government institutions. And I think sometimes what we find in minority communities, and that includes the Asian Pacific Islander community, is that given the experience that we've had with government in our native land, given the experience of government that I think many of us begin to have as we become residents of our respective jurisdictions, that oftentimes it's not an easy experience. It's not an easy experience. And I thought that what Papa asked me to do tonight in terms of just understanding what our government looks like and what their various functions are was a wonderful beginning to talk about then how do you become involved with it, how do you begin to work with it, and how do you continue to have engagement with it. Because these are your decision makers that are going to affect a lot of things about your quality of life here in the Tri-Valley. So without further ado, we'll get started. So we're calling this Government 101, but you're going to hear a lot about this because I think as you look at how we're electing our representatives within our city councils, on our special district boards, on the county board of supervisors, certainly in state legislative offices, and our members of Congress. They're going to want to really reach out to communities like this very community here in the San Ramon Valley and try to help you make the connection between what they do and why it's important for you to pay attention. So we call it Government 101 because 101 is generally the basics of what we learn about our government, and I hope that this will be successful in terms of how we talk about it. So we have actually in the United States, 3 branches of government, and you'll hear this commonly referred to as one, the legislative branch, and this is the branch at the state level that essentially makes our laws, right? So everything that you do is governed by a body of law, and the decision-making body and the body that actually enacts these laws is called the legislature. We'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Oftentimes when the laws are applied, there may be some ambiguity or uncertainty about what the law means. So if it needs to be further clarified or interpreted, then the courts may get involved, and the courts make up our judicial branch of government. The executive branch of government is the branch that actually carries out the law. So I'll give you an example. So recently, the legislature enacted a bill that allowed undocumented immigrants to be able to apply for a driver's license. And so the legislature made the law through a bill. It was, I believe, AB 60 was the bill number. The judicial branch hasn't gotten involved yet. There haven't been any lawsuits around any ambiguity in the law. But the executive branch is going to carry out the law. And so part of the executive branch is the Department of Motor Vehicles. And so these are state agencies and departments that actually run the programs, implement the programs, administer the programs that are created by the legislature. Now, I'm going to just introduce this word. I hope it's the last time we ever talk about it, okay? But, when the reason that we're structured like this with 3 branches of government is that our nation's founders created this, what we call separation of powers, that if you have three branches of government, and essentially they're kind of a checks and balances against one another. So that you don't have any one branch that really is going to run everything. They're not going to overreach in terms of their power and authority. And so this is a way to really create this system of checks and balances to prevent what we call tyranny. And that is, as I said, not any one branch having too much control and overstepping their reach. So the definition of tyranny is essentially unjust or oppressive government power. And sometimes we see examples of tyranny in some of our countries abroad, where they're trying to reach a point of where they can establish a democracy, and yet there still isn't a government that creates checks and balances and where people really have a strong voice. And then also we see tyranny that's possible when we have a government in which there is a single ruler that's vested with what we call absolute power, and that is really where all of the decision-making authority lies. And so I raise this with you because so much of our engagement, sometimes we don't think about what the alternative government structure can look like, and this is certainly one of the possibilities, and it's what the Founding Fathers really wanted to prevent when they created the three branches of government. Now, at the federal level, the executive branch is led by the President of the United States, and he's also called the Commander-in-Chief. And Barack Obama is our 44th President of the United States, and we're going to have another presidential election in November 2016, so he will be essentially succeeded by another president after that election. The executive branch at the federal level is also comprised of different agencies and departments, and so, for example, when we talk about the Medicare program, it's run by the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and this is the executive branch that essentially runs the Medicare program that looks at providing health coverage for our elderly population and our retired population. Now in California, we have 8 statewide elected constitutional officers who lead the executive branch. Now they're the governor, and that's our Governor Jerry Brown, our Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, our Attorney General, that's Attorney General Kamala Harris. Our Secretary of State is Alex Padilla. Our Superintendent of Public Instruction is Tom Torkelson. Our Insurance Commissioner is Dave Jones. Our Treasurer is John Chung, and I currently serve as your State Controller. These are independently elected statewide constitutional offices that have very, very specific duties that are independent from the governor and his executive branch. We are a part of the executive branch, but our authorities are really independent of the governor's decision-making authority and the executive branch. Now, my role in terms of what I do. So oftentimes people get the notion that a controller is really someone who controls everything, and that is not true because, as I said earlier, we have 3 branches of government. I'm not allowed to control everything, and frankly, I don't want to control everything. This is a participatory government, and as State Controller, I am the California's Chief Fiscal Officer, which means that I'm the person essentially minding the store of the state. My office works to ensure that public money is being spent as it should be, and we conduct audits when we believe that is not the case. We process payroll for over 250,000 state employees and retirees. And when you get your personal income tax refund, I have the great honor of signing those checks. So I'm very, very proud to do that. So actually, let me go back to that slide. So the Controller's Office, I want to talk about this power to audit because this is one of the checks and balances that we have in our own office. So I'm an independent fiscal watchdog, which means that when we see that there are potential for mismanagement of public funds, my office has the ability and the authority to essentially go in and audit a specific department or agency. And I'm very proud to say that since January, when I took office, to today, my auditors have uncovered close to $1.9 billion that is subject to unauthorized expenditures or unlawful spending, as well as cost savings, where we have just a lot of duplication in programs, and also recovering funds such as mistakes in payroll amounts and the like. So we're just trying to be a good watchdog and be sure that the dollars are being directed where they should go. So it doesn't mean that we're $1.9 billion richer, it just means that we found the money and it was going to the wrong place, so now we're getting it back to the right place. So one program that we have in the State Controller's Office, which I want to just plug because it's a very, very important program. And that's called the Unclaimed Property Program. And I want all of you to just go on my website when you have an opportunity. It's www.sco.ca.gov, and then look up your name and see whether you may have property that you didn't know you had that's gone unclaimed. And you'd be surprised because it could be a bank account that you forgot that you had. It could be a tax refund check that you didn't cash that was still holding on to the amounts of. All of this is your property, and the state gets to hold it in perpetuity until you claim it. And if you are able to verify that you do have property, you can then file a claim online at claimant.ca.gov. And I really encourage you to do this because you never know. You never know. And certainly for members of your family. But we ran voluntary income tax filing centers all throughout the state this year. And we actually were able to help a family find $7,000 that they didn't know that their parents had. And so it's really worth going in and just seeing if you've got any idle accounts that you didn't know you had. It could be also a safe deposit box if you forgot about at a particular bank. Okay, but our job is to reunite that property with the rightful owners, and hopefully, if any of you are in that position, we can help you go ahead and claim that property. I also represent. I represent Californians and over on 78 boards and commissions, overseeing everything from our large public pension funds, the California Public Employees Retirement System, as well as the California Teachers Retirement System, and also commissions that deal with how we use our state lands and coastline. And I can delve into each of these a little deeper, but there's information on our website in terms of what these commissions and boards do. These are the particular commissions that I personally serve on with my time, so it's really a broad reach in terms of the policy decisions that the Controller's Office gets to make. Now, as I said, the Governor Jerry Brown is our chief executive of the state. He heads up our executive branch. And the California's governor essentially communicates on behalf of the state with other states and the federal government. So he is our spokesperson for California. He oversees and appoints directors of the majority of state agencies. These are the agencies, and within each of the agencies there are various departments. But you can see how varied these are. So everything that relates to our transportation systems, our prison system, how we deal with our natural resources protection and coastline protection and other types of natural resources, how we deal with our health and human services programs or our social safety net programs. So we run in California, we run the version of the federal Medicaid program called Medi-Cal, which is under the Health and Human Services program. We also have foster care, child care, and child welfare services under the Department of Social Services. The Labor and Workforce Development oversees the Employment Development Department and the Department of Industrial Relations and other agencies, Fair Employment and Housing, that actually oversee employment-related issues, everything from wages to employment discrimination. We have the Veterans Affairs Administration, which in California really oversees what Veteran Service Centers are doing at the county level, as well as running our veterans homes that we have located throughout California. Emergency management, obviously to look at how we're going to prepare ourselves for natural disasters, and here specifically in Northern California, earthquakes, but certainly with climate change, we are getting more prepared for our rising sea levels and the kind of damage that it could do as well. So you'll be hearing more about emergency management. Natural resources, as I said, works very closely with environmental protection. Food and agriculture, what we do relative to how we be sure that our food is safe and inspected, and how we also regulate the agricultural industry here in California. And then, of course, consumer services, where we have a lot of the regulatory boards that oversee the various professions in California. So this would include, for example, the division or the Bureau of Cosmetology. So if you go to beauty salons, they're regulated by the Department of Consumer Affairs, and these are all fee-based services, so that those who are being regulated pay a fee to their particular bureau or entity to oversee the rules that apply to them. So where does our state spending come from? This is really, for me anyway, I think as citizens, we want to be sure that we have a say about how we want to see our tax dollars allocated. And I chose to go into this particular profession in public finance and tax policy because in the public sector, I believe that the decisions around how we allocate our resources are the most important public policy decisions we can make. So as you're electing your mayors, your local city council members, your local water board district members, your local school district board members, as you're electing your legislators, as you're electing your statewide officers, of which I am one, really the area about how we're going to deal with state spending and how our resources are allocated is really some of the greatest decisions that we can make to influence your daily lives. But we need to know where our resources come from. And so the governor has the ability to sign or veto bills that come to him from the legislative branch. Remember, we talked about the legislative branch, the legislature making the laws, so he can actually choose to sign those bills or veto them. And usually one of the considerations is how are we going to fund what the bill asks us to do. So the governor is very responsible also for proposing a budget to the legislature every year on January 10th, and then the legislature takes until June 30th, hopefully June 15th, so we have enough time to put a new budget in place before July 1st, beginning of the new fiscal year. But to look at the budget bill and to see whether we can keep spending in line, but also have the spending support the various public services at the state level. Now, where does the resources come from to fund our state government? The state general fund, which is the biggest checking account of the state, relies on personal income taxes, which I believe all of you pay. Thank you very much. Sales and use tax, mostly generated by our businesses and retailers. Also, corporation taxes for some of the major corporations that are here in California, and a whole host of other taxes and fees. And here you can see what the breakdown of each of those funding sources are. This year, the budget bill that was just enacted by the legislature and the governor for the fiscal year that began July 1st anticipates $157 billion in spending by the various agencies under the executive branch. The largest area of spending is for our K-14 public education, so K-12 school districts as well as community college districts. At the federal level, I want to just shift gears a little bit because at the federal level, the legislative branch is made up of the United States Senate, which has 100 members, and here, which means every state, each of the 50 states, gets to elect 2 members to the United States Senate. And the House of Representatives, which has 435 members, that are divided among the states based on the size of their population. So California, being 39 million people strong, we have a very, very large congressional delegation. And so as the most populated state, we have 53 of the 435 members of the House of Representatives. These federal legislative bodies are responsible for setting policy on issues such as immigration, such as banking, such as foreign policy. So these are the issue areas that really are elevated to the federal level because they have a broad-based application across all 50 states. And of course, the one issue that we're all very, very interested in is comprehensive immigration reform. And so we are definitely want to have some knowledge of what our representatives are doing there. And I understand that the current representative here is Congressman Eric Swalwell, who's been a great supporter of APAPA as well. But certainly this community's engagement with Congressman Swalwell will certainly influence how he thinks about a lot of these issues. So the little red and blue figures here show the gender and the party breakdown of the California Senate and the House of Representatives. In California, our upper house is called the State Senate, so we're going back now to the state legislature, while our lower house is called the Assembly. So just like in Congress, we just looked at the figure for Congress. We have the United States Senate, and then the lower house is called the House of Representatives. So here in California, the Senate has 40 members, and the Assembly has 80 members. These districts are divided by population, much like Congress. A term in the state Senate is 4 years, while Assembly members are up for election every 2 years. Based on term limit laws that were approved by California voters most recently, an individual can serve up to 12 total years in the legislature, either in one house or split between the two. So there is a limit on the amount of years that anyone can serve, either in one house or between the two houses. The California legislature considers around 6,000 bills every year, or actually every 2-year session. So we have what we call a bicameral legislature, which means there are 2 houses, and that is the Senate and the Assembly. And they convene for what we call a session that is made up of 2 years. So they meet for the first year. Usually they introduce bills, but they also have the ability to introduce bills in the second year as well. But those bills that were introduced in the first year of the 2-year session have a shorter time frame to make it through the first House of Origin. Now they go through committee hearings, each of the bills, and then to a vote of the full body of each house before they go to the governor's desk. Only a small portion of these bills are signed into law. So of the 6,000 bills, probably, I would say, it depends on how much these bills cost, but on any given occasion, it's very, very rarely we even see 50% of those bills get enacted. So it has to go through approval by each of the houses and then also signed by the governor. This particular chart shows how the bill becomes a law. It's the flow chart, okay, of how the bill becomes a law. So an idea becomes a bill. This is where we come in. Ideas come from all different sources, and usually members of the legislature are responding to issues that they see in their districts or that they see throughout the state at large. And they want to really address some of the issues where maybe the current law isn't addressing these issues very well. And so we could be the origin of bill ideas, any one of us in this room. So if any of you have a bill idea in this room, you can contact your legislative member and really speak to the staff about whether it's a good idea for a bill. Maybe it's something that the legislature has already tried to deal with in the past, and they can give you the history about how to address it. Or more importantly, maybe it's something you can actually address locally with your local city council or county board of supervisors. But all to say that each of us here can actually have that idea that becomes a bill. And then it gives you the flow about how a bill gets introduced, where it gets introduced, the flow of how it goes through the committee process, how it goes through then a vote in each house of the legislature before it goes to the governor's desk, and he will decide whether to sign it to become law or veto it because he's opposed to the legislation. Now, our judicial branch, excuse me, the judicial branch is comprised of 58 superior courts, and these are the courts that we know best at the local level. They are run by the counties and funded by the state. And we also have 6 district courts of appeal, and then of course the state Supreme Court. It is a separate branch of government, as we talked about, the California Judicial Branch. So essentially the 58 superior courts are what we call the county's trial courts. So if you have a matter that is in litigation, more than likely it will be initiated and tried in what we call the Superior Court, which is run by the county. They hear not just civil cases, but also criminal cases as well. And that's about, the caseload's about 8 million cases a year. So it's quite a busy branch of government. Superior Court judges are elected by voters in each county on a nonpartisan ballot. Although many of our Superior Court judges were initially appointed by the governor. The governor has appointing authority for Superior Court judges, and they then need to run for election to maintain their seat. Now, I say this because this is where we also can have representation by the API community, and that is when we look at the Superior Courts in California, we don't have very many Asian APIs that are on the bench right now. And I know that we have many who are in the legal profession and who are very skilled and very equipped to be appointed as judges. And that's one of the things that, because it is a nonpartisan issue, I hope that the API community can really put some muscle behind this, because we want to know that we have fair jurists who are sitting on the bench. We want to know that our judges represent the diversity of the state of California. And more importantly, we want to be sure that when we look at how we oftentimes call getting a trial by our peers, that whoever's presiding over the courts can ensure that that happens. And I think having judges who look like us really helps ensure that that does happen. The state also has 6 district courts of appeal, and basically these courts hear appeals of rulings that are issued by the Superior Court. So if a party is not satisfied with the ruling that they get from the Superior Court at the local county level, they can appeal that ruling to the appeals court, the state appeals court. And we have every issue can go to a district court of appeals. There are some bodies in the executive branch that have their own appeals process. So for example, if you have a workers' compensation issue, there is actually an appeals board that specifically hears workers' compensation cases, and there are a couple of other boards that do the same. But basically, it is the Court of Appeals that hear those appeals from trial court rulings. The California Supreme Court is our highest court in the state. It has 7 justices who serve, and is currently led by an API leader, and that is Chief Justice Tani Cantil-Sakaole, who was appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger. This court hears appeals of the district courts of appeal rulings. So you can see each level is elevating the appeal of the rulings of the lower court before them. And the court automatically reviews all criminal cases that end with a death penalty judgment. So very important, we do have a death penalty provision in California for those who are serving that sentence in our state prison, but they review all criminal cases that involve a death penalty judgment. The Supreme Court can also be petitioned to provide extraordinary relief where no other remedy exists. And all the other courts in California are bound to the rulings of the court, which can be overturned by the nation's top court, and that is the United States Supreme Court. In the field where I work, there have been many tax-related issues that have gone through this process in the state courts, and some of them have such broad application and multi-state application that oftentimes parties will take those cases to the United States Supreme Court, and they will make a ruling that will affect not just our state, but potentially be precedential for all 50 states. So I want to just break it down now to the local level. We talked about some of these and what they hear. Our district courts here. There's our Chief Justice. We're very, very proud of her. So where we all really have the ability to have our voice expressed is in our local government, in our halls of local government. The first units of local government people usually think of are cities and counties. And here, we're in the Tri-Valley. We are in the city of San Ramon, in the county of Contra Costa. And so California has 58 counties. The California Constitution requires that all counties elect, excuse me, bring this back. Okay. So the California Constitution requires that all counties elect a sheriff, a district attorney, an assessor, and a board of supervisors. And the board of supervisors serves as the legislative body of the county. So they're the ones who are going to be essentially administering programs. And counties are an interesting form of government because they essentially are the level between the state and cities. And when we look at counties in California, they actually wear 3 different hats in California. So counties act as agents of the state in terms of providing health and human services. Remember, one of the agencies of the governor and his executive branch was the Health and Human Services Agency. And so those programs that deal with child welfare services, foster care, that deal with Medi-Cal, that deal with inspecting our nursing homes and the like, those services are actually administered by the county. So the state essentially gives the funding to the counties, and they take over, and the counties take on that responsibility. So what we call that role of the county is that they are the administrative agents of the state with respect to our health and human services. Now, counties also provide sheriffs who oversee our jails, also our probation department. We have animal control services that are administered by the counties, and they also collect property taxes. So when we look at the other half that the counties wear, they provide what we call county-wide services. So all of these entities, the sheriffs, the jails, probation, animal control services, our assessors, our auditor, our tax collector, they provide county-wide services. And then the third half that counties get to wear is that they have jurisdiction over providing what we call municipal services in the unincorporated areas. Now, municipal services are things that we know about, and that is things like parks and libraries. In a city, those are generally governed by a city council. But if you have areas in the county that are not a city, that are unincorporated, then the county has that responsibility for providing those services. And so that is really what we mean by municipal services for the unincorporated area. They're also responsible for the planning and development of those areas of the county as well. Now we get down to the city level. California has 482 cities, and they range in age from 4 years old to 165 years old. And I like talking about this because the younger cities, obviously, are ones that become independent cities much more recently. And a lot of that has to do with citizen action, in believing that when they become incorporated on their own, that they can develop their own tax base and feel that they can generate their own revenue base to support the services that they come to rely on. And so a city can become incorporated by essentially splitting off from the county. And there's a process for how they do that, and it goes through a voter approval process. But it is really great to say that there still are cities being developed and being established today. Each of the cities are governed by an elected city council, and that is the legislative body that decides how local tax dollars are going to be spent. And they can create local land use rules and other regulations. They often provide municipal services, again, what we do with our parks, libraries, streets, and roads. And they range in, cities range in population in California from 112 people in a city to 4 million people. You ask, how's that possible? How's that possible? Some of the cities that we've seen, particularly in Los Angeles County, were developed because they wanted to have an incorporated area that was going to support different types of businesses. And I will just talk about the city of Vernon. That's the city that has a population of 112 people, but it has a whole host of businesses that make up a tremendous proportion of the GDP of Los Angeles County. So we have rendering companies there, we have Farmer John products down there, we have all kinds of manufacturing that happens in the city of Vernon. But only 112 people live in the city of Vernon. So it's been subject to a lot of controversy because when you only have 112 people living there, are they really watching what their city government is doing? Right? So my office, as I mentioned earlier, we have the ability to audit any jurisdiction, state agency, state department, local governments that receive any kind of public funds, and particularly state funds. All cities receive some sort of state funding. And I can tell you, we've not audited Vernon, but there was a subject of controversy several years ago. But we currently are auditing some cities in Southern California where we're finding some very egregious things, where a lot of the services that are being provided by the city happen to be by contracts with relatives of those who have been elected to office, where contracts aren't being awarded according to state law, and where we have really no good internal fiscal controls in terms of where local residents' tax dollars are going. And that's the job that my audit team does. And I say this because I think one of the greatest responsibilities of all of us as residents of our cities, as residents of our community, is to really be that watchful citizen eye about where our tax dollars go. Because if we don't do that, we're going to see potentially a lot of misuse of our public dollars. We're going to see maybe our public dollars be subject to fraudulent activity and even worse, criminal activity. And we don't want that for any city. And frankly, what gets compromised are the services that we come to rely on with respect to what we think we're paying our tax dollars for. So very, very important role that we can play as citizens. We have also another entity of government called special districts. And I believe here in the Tri-Valley area there are quite a few. So we have special park districts. The East Bay Regional Park District is a special district. And basically what special districts are these are special entities of government that are providing services that aren't being provided by a county or by a city. And they have their own authority to essentially levy assessments to fund the services that they provide. And also provide municipal services in place of city government. So when early on when California was being developed, And before we actually had cities, we had special districts that were providing for some very basic needs, such as water, other utilities, parks, libraries, fire services. And so many of those entities are still in existence today, even though it would make sense to really collapse them into our existing municipalities. But this is really something that we've just continued on. And what's interesting to me is that so what's interesting to me about special districts is that they're very little known, and yet they have tremendous impact. So, how many of you see your property tax bill every year? Okay. I'm going to ask you the next time you receive it, just take a close look at it. Because this is really important, because I take a very close look at it. I don't know what I'm paying for. And basically you have your local property tax that you pay to the county treasurer tax collector. That's usually 1% of assessed value for your home. But then we have all these other assessments that are listed under there. And sometimes it's an added percentage for dealing with some general obligation bonds that are issued to pay for some infrastructure. And then you have a list of these assessments that are actually levied by a special district. It could be for your parks, it could be for your roads, it could be for a whole host of things. But just take a look at that, because that really comprises all of the services that you're entitled to, given the fact that you're paying those assessments and paying those taxes. And the reason I say special districts are little known is because they kind of blend in. They provide services like any other governmental entity. But this is an area where I'm just going to say there's a lot of opportunity in terms of how we can really participate with special districts. Not only in terms of having input before their boards, but also any of us who are interested in serving on those boards and being really a steward of these dollars and allocating them to meet the needs of these districts. All of the special districts, all of the counties, and all the cities actually have to submit their financial reports to our office. And we do random audits of these, essentially desk audits. But when we see discrepancies that appear between what they report and what actually we see in terms of their final financial statements, then we will go out and actually audit them more closely. And that's something we take very, very seriously because, as I said, these are really tax dollars for all of us. Now, I know we're going to have a separate conversation with Ken about education, but just in terms of the structure of education. So public education in California, we have essentially school districts and community college districts that govern our public education system in California. Now remember, we just talked about the 4,800 special districts that we have in California. They do not include public education districts because most of the funding for school districts and community college districts come from the state. There are almost 1,000 elected school boards in California, which govern around 9,900 public schools serving 6 million students. And I think for all of us here, and certainly this is how I got my start in politics, and that is we want to be very, very engaged with our school districts. Mainly because they're getting money from the state. They're also getting money from their local property taxes, because that is a major funding source of schools as well. And because they're getting most of the money from the state, they feel like they don't have a lot of authority. School district board members don't feel like they have a lot of authority to really make a lot of independent decisions because those dollars from the state are for certain purposes. But we want to be sure that those dollars are going to their intended purposes, and so, as you can imagine, our office also has the ability to audit school districts when that is not the case. We have community college districts, which includes 112 community colleges that serve 2.1 million students in California. And these institutions, many of you are familiar with them. There's several of them here in the Tri-Valley region. But they essentially help students either pursue a different kind of higher education, particularly if they want to get an Associate of Arts degree in a whole range of different types of what we call paraprofessions, or the trades or crafts. We also utilize our community colleges for job training, and a really an important resource when we have particularly economic downturns and those who have been laid off or are looking for new job skills can rely on community colleges to provide that. And then also for looking at how students can save some money, because going to a 4-year higher education institution now is quite costly. And so it may be an option to go to a local community college that has a robust transfer agreement with our UC and CSU system. And we oftentimes don't talk about career or technical training, but our public universities do provide that. And it's a different avenue in terms of the kind of higher education training that we can provide for California students who may not want to pursue professional degrees. Meanwhile, we have 23 CSU, California State University campuses. I'm very proud of those. They really produce our core teachers in California, and very, very important in terms of producing the overwhelming majority of our educators in California. And California also is the home of 10 University of California campuses that serve about almost 239,000 students. And University of California, Berkeley being still one of the most popular schools around the world. So we have in California, I think, a fairly complex government system, but at the same time, it really reflects, I think, the diversity of California's needs relative to what we want our government to do for the residents of California. And so while I've just talked about the structure of government, I want to end with just talking about why do we need to know about this? Why do we need to know about this? And I think the reason we need to know about this is because so much of what affects us in terms of our daily lives are subject to the decisions of decision makers at the state and local level who we elect. And who we elect who are going to be attentive to the needs of our communities really are going to be those that we want to be sure we have engagement with. And so when Papa talks about voter engagement, when it talks about civic participation, when it talks about ongoing, really community participation, this is what we're talking about. And it's not over just after you vote on election day. We may support our candidates, we may support different ballot measures, but this engagement is about ongoing, lifelong engagement. Because what we see oftentimes is that when communities don't engage with our local elected officials, or even your elected representatives in the legislature or in Congress, these communities get ignored. They get ignored. And one of the great things about APABA, and I will support APABA really throughout, because what it has done is that it's really provided a forum for us to learn about issues. Our candidate forums and issues forums that APABA puts on every single year, and with robust participation by the APAC community, whether in Sacramento or other parts of the state, is exactly to educate and to raise awareness about issues that could be very, very influential in all of our lives. And so what I would just end with is to say this. There's a great saying now with respect to our government that, and particularly with newer communities of our California population, that if we don't engage, we're going to be essentially asked to comply with laws that we haven't had any voice in developing. And so it's really something that we take very, very seriously. And all of you are here tonight because I hope you want to learn about how to get engaged. And if any of you are interested in having an active role in terms of decision making, one of the great ways to do that, I know Andy is being modest because he doesn't tell you what he does with most of his time, and that is you can be appointed to a local board or commission. And these local decisions are so, so important. And many of you know about planning commissions. I know where I'm from in San Francisco, we have an entertainment commission. But these are the commissions that really develop recommendations for the legislative bodies, for the city council, for the board of supervisors, for the state legislature. There are state level appointments as well, that really are going to affect what we want our communities to look like. So if we don't want to see a nightclub open up across the street from where we live or close to a local school, we're going to want to appeal to the Entertainment Commission in San Francisco. And we want to know that we have people on that commission who understand the needs of the API community. The fact that we value education and we want our children to do well, and we don't want our communities to be flooded with entertainment venues that are going to distract from the quality of our communities. So I leave that to say, please stay engaged. Your being here tonight is really a first step. And I know that the other programs that Andy will be bringing to this Tri-Valley chapter, and Margaret and others who are leading this chapter remarkably, are going to just help you just understand your government better, but more importantly, are going to help connect you with different aspects of government so that your voice can be heard. And I just want to say I'm just really honored to be here with all of you, and I will definitely close with this story because it's one that's very personal to me. As I said earlier, I'm a first-generation American. My mother, who is 92 years old and still lives in San Francisco, didn't become a registered voter until I decided to run for office. And man, oh man, did she go through those naturalization process and take the test. But she wanted to vote for her daughter in the very first election. And she had been in the country since 1956, but just never thought to vote. Never thought to vote because she didn't think government mattered to her. And when I grew up in the laundry dry cleaning business that they operated, I was their translator for financial affairs with government agencies, with banks, with vendors. And so they were taken care of. The kids were the best employees, right? You know, we don't have to deal with government. Our kids will deal with it. Well, as she got older, she began to realize, you know, things were changing in San Francisco. The neighborhood where she grew up, where we all grew up with them, with my dad and her running the business, was starting to look very, very different. All of a sudden, you know, we were having a lot more, you know, different kinds of businesses coming into the neighborhood. Not necessarily for the better, because they weren't keeping the streets clean. And they didn't care about the community, they were just there to make a buck. And who was she going to appeal to? And more importantly, she wanted somebody that she could vote for, aside from me, who was going to represent her at City Hall in San Francisco, who she could call, pick up the phone and call and say, look, you know, this is what's happening and we don't like it. And so she became naturalized in time to vote for me in my first election. But more importantly, she is a sustained voter now, which means she votes every election cycle. She not only votes every election cycle, but after she votes, she gets on the phone with all of her friends and she talks about all the issues on the ballot. That's our responsibility. That is our responsibility. It doesn't matter what the issue is, and frankly, it doesn't even matter how you vote on the issue. What does matter is that you participate. Because as we look at who we've elected into office, I'm just going to say, Congressman Mike Honda, who many of us know in this room, he's often said that if we don't show up to vote, we're going to have things done to us that we really miss an opportunity to have influence on. And that's what this is all about. And so I think for all of us who want to see a wonderful quality of life here in the Tri-Valley, we want to be sure that we have those who are going to listen to us when we have issues of concern that we raise. And where we want to see really high quality, good quality, top quality schools and public education institutions. This is the reason why we want to participate. So again, thank you very much. And I think my time's done because my voice is coming out. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Betty. It was very inspiring, and it's a wealth of information that will be very useful for us. Next speaker, we would like to introduce Dr. Ken Fong. He will be here to share some information about higher education in California, especially relating to tuition and admission policy, a subject that's very interested by many Asian families. Dr. Fong is a venture capitalist. Currently, he's a founder and chairman of Kenson Venture LLC, a California-based venture investment company founded in 1999. Within 5 years, from 2007 to 2012, there were 7 companies that either went public or were acquired under his leadership. He's also a member of the committee of C100, the board of associates at the Whitehead Biomedical Institute at MIT, and endowed professorship at Stanford University. Between 2006 and 2013, he also served as a member of the board of the trustees of California State University. Let's welcome Dr. Ken Fong.
The slide here.
Yeah. It's just this way.
I'm so happy to be here with Betty, our controller. And, Betty was actually at the Board of Equalization, member also the chair, right? And you must like that job too, because that job is collecting taxes, I guess, right? Responsible for collecting taxes. And your neighbors, CCN, is a good contributor of taxes in the state of California. so you must love him, when you work at the department. But right now, when you become the controller,